We had dominating victories, furious comebacks, but we also saw some absolute heartbreak. The second round showed us a little bit of everything, and I feel like that's a tune-up for the quarterfinals.
Yeah, we're down to the Elite Eight in 11 man and the Final Four in 8 man. So we're really getting down to the nitty gritty here, Greg.
All right, well, let's get into it. The nitty and the gritty.
Talking Illinois high school football.
If your goals are as high as you talk about, tonight's the night you go out and just take one more step.
It's a view from the West.
And it starts right now!
Welcome back to View from the West podcast. I'm your host, Greg Armstrong, joined as always by Mitch Stormer. Mitch, it was kind of a wild weekend weather-wise and some of the game action that we saw. We now have 11 teams remaining. We'll get into all that, but how was your weekend? How was your viewing experience over both Friday and Saturday?
Yeah, you put it pretty well, probably best as you could there in the intro. We saw a lot of good games. We saw a lot of great performances from teams that we expected, maybe some that we didn't, I suppose. Yeah, teams coming from behind, teams that led from the very first play of scrimmage. And as you mentioned, some absolute heartbreak in Moline that we'll talk about, Quincy. So we bid farewell to some really good teams this year that we really enjoyed covering. And that's, the power of the playoffs. And you're just going to have a great game every single week. You're going to see a great matchup every single week. And unfortunately, someone has to bow out. So, but viewing wise, it was great. Again, we appreciate all of the local schools who are either signed up with NFHS or like Princeton, who does their own thing. So makes it really fun to stay tuned here in playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, the power of the playoffs is the good, the great is we're seeing our teams march on. And the downside, the bad side is you see some really good, really great, talented football teams and players that fall short. And it's the end of a great career or the end of a great season in a lot of cases. And I guess that's the highs and the lows of it. That's what we love about this time of year. We'll get into all of it in a minute here, but we want to take a minute to thank everyone who downloads, who subscribes, who listens every week. Mitch, we had another huge week this week, numbers wise, for listeners. We had great following on Twitter. If you like View from the West podcast on Twitter, you can thank Mitch Stormer. He's killing it on Fridays and Saturdays. Mitch, every week now, I usually will log in and start looking at a few things and I just bow out. I let you do your thing because I don't want to retweet or tweet something you've already tweeted.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's happened a couple of times, and I'll see that you had done it previously, or what, I'll think of something and then it's like, no, we already did that. So yeah, again, incredibly thankful for our followers. We should have kept track of how many we were at the beginning of the year. But hard to believe we're, getting closer to 2,000. I mean, we're still 1,700, but we get a handful every week. So again, we thank everybody for following along. We're having a lot of fun, and we hope you are too.
Absolutely. Yeah, we thank everybody for supporting us along the way. If you want to support what we're doing, you can also do that by using PayPal. Mitch, it's as easy as paypal.me/viewfromwestpod. It's the pinned tweet at the top of our Twitter account. We encourage anyone who wants to support, our coverage of local high school athletics to head out to PayPal, and you can do that. So we'll thank you in advance for that. But Mitch, let's get right into it. We're going to talk a little bit about the second round, and then we're obviously jumping into all of our matchups in the quarterfinals. Mitch, we got more teams this year in the quarterfinals than we did a year ago. So that's exciting, from the start.
Yeah, I sent that to you here either last night or whatever it was, but just in 11 man, I didn't remember how many we had in 8 man last year, but we only had 4 teams in the quarterfinals last year in 11 man, and now we have 8. So we joke about job security here on this podcast, but we certainly got it this year. Seeing a lot of teams advance. So again, makes these episodes longer, right? Because we're just talking about the same teams. But also just exciting to see kind of what our thoughts are about the teams that we cover and the conferences that we cover, and have that kind of go or come into fruition as they keep advancing throughout the state playoffs. So kudos to those teams who made it and who are still alive.
Yep. exciting times, like you said, for us covering it here. The really exciting part is we have at least one team from every conference that we cover. The
Yep.
Western Big Six has a team left. The Three Rivers Athletic Conference has both of their champions from each side of the conference divisions. We have a team from the Lincoln Trail Conference. And Mitch, the Northwest Upstate Illini did pretty well for themselves this week in Class 1A, huh?
Yeah, as much as we all expected, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's not even a joke. So, yeah, we're going to be covering a championship game in 1A, right? There's going to be a team from the NUIC that will be in Champaign this year. So, that is very, very exciting. And again, a testament to the long-standing traditions of the NUIC, as once again, we'll have representatives at state. But in this round specifically, having all 4 teams in the quarterfinals, making up the 1A North. Unbelievable. Super cool.
Well, and good representation from the NUIC 8-man
Yeah.
division with Polo, the 2-time defending state champions, still
Mhm.
alive, and Amboy getting an impressive win. So, all that to talk about, obviously, coming up. That'll be later on in the show. We start in Class 7A. Mitch, this is the heartbreak we were referring to. Yorkville gets the win 34-31 over Moline in 4 overtimes. Just
Mhm.
a gut-wrenching loss for Moline. Mitch, you were kind of riding the highs and the lows of this one, watching it Friday
Yeah.
night. Tell me about it. What a game.
Oh, it's hard to even talk about it, really. Don't even want to get into specifics on how it went. It
Yeah.
was just it was that hard to watch. It really was. We came into this game knowing that Yorkville had a really, really good defense, and we knew that about Moline too. And you really saw that in the second half, where both teams were just exchanging punts back and forth. I wish I had the number of how many punts each team had. And I don't want to say that it was, bad offense or some sort of anemic offense, because both teams were driving.
Yeah.
They just would eventually be the opposite defense would take over. Credit really to Moline in the second quarter specifically, because Yorkville had the ball, I think, the entire quarter except for 2 plays. And so, and again, it was more so in the second half where the game it seemed like not much was going on, but as a football fan and watching it, you knew that you were watching a really good or 2 really good teams. Um, yeah, goes to overtime. I think Yorkville had a shot there at the end. They were kind of driving, but nothing came out of that. So they go to overtime and just back and forth. In IHSA, you start from the 10-yard line, and it's first and goal essentially. And so you saw quick scores the first couple of overtimes, where if it was on the first play or the second play, Yorkville and Moline were both getting into the end zone. So you fast forward to the 4th overtime. Again, that Moline defense comes up stingent, comes up strong, forces Yorkville into a field goal. They go up. And in Moline's turn in the 4th quarter, they get down inside the 5. They get to it's the 2 or it's the 1. I can't remember where exactly the ball was placed, but
I think they were on the 1.
On the 1, okay.
Yep.
And again, this is where that Yorkville defense just shined. I mean, there was debate, right? There was Twitter back and forth about what you do in that sort of situation, right? And we see this all the time in football, right? You either can try and take the point, 2-point conversions, let's say. You
Yep.
can just make the kick, or you go for 2, or in a 4th and short. Hey, do you go for it? Hey, do you kick the field goal? Do you take the points? I have no quarrels about Moline going for it here. They have 2 chances at it. They get stopped both times, and it was a heartbreaking thing to watch. I kept saying to myself, like, come on, Moline, just get in. And again, credit to the Foxes defense for coming up short. They gave it to Riley Fuller, the guy who probably scores on that play 9 out of 10 times.
Yep.
And it's what happens in the playoffs. So, a historic game, tied an IHSA record for most overtimes in a playoff game, set the record for a 7A game. Again, not that that's, something that you hang your hat on from a game like that. Certainly Coach Morrissey and the Maroons, I doubt, care about that all that much, but they have nothing to be ashamed of. This was an excellent game. Yorkville, a very good squad. A shame that either one of the teams honestly had to lose this one. And again, I hope Coach Morrissey sleeps well with his decision making, because I think that was the right call. You go for the win, whether they talked about it or not prior, I can't say. But you put the ball in the hands of your playmakers. Kids are going to want to score, and it just didn't work out this time. So a great game, great to watch, and again, just a really hard game to kind of regurgitate and talk about. But it was really really hard to see too, especially afterwards. Because the cameras stayed on the broadcast, and you saw that not only did you see the celebration on the Yorkville side, but as the camera would pan, you saw the Moline contingent of players huddled around all the family and friends that were there, and all the fans had come off the stands onto the field too. And it was just, I've been there, as I talked to you before. I know how that feels. I know how it feels to lose your last game of the year in the playoffs, and it just, I feel for those kids. My advice is that it gets better. It's going to sting for a long, long time. It gets better. But man, what a fun season they had, right?
Yeah, I mean, unbelievable, season for them. You consider some of the numbers they put up. I don't have them right here in front of me. We'll certainly talk about, the full season later, down the road.
Yeah.
But the season they put together and some of the numbers they put together, considering they only played 8 games, right? They're all in
Right.
the game ended up being a forfeit. So when you start looking at, some of the numbers they were able to produce, they had a great season, fantastic
Mhm.
season. And, I caught up with this at the end, and we were out at a family function, and we were on our way home, and my wife's driving, and I get onto Twitter to see what's going on, and it was right in that fourth overtime. And I'm just, trying to get updates constantly. And credit to Jackson Stone, reporter from the QC Times. He was all over it, Mitch. I mean, he was
Oh yeah.
live tweeting better than maybe any game I've ever seen. It was great.
Yeah.
I'm not exaggerating either. I
Oh
really
no,
was so impressed.
yeah, I saw it firsthand. Obviously following along with him, but also my feed was like 2 minutes behind everything.
Okay.
So if I was on, I tried not to be on Twitter because I didn't want it to be spoiled or anything. But
Yeah.
there would be times that something would happen before I actually saw it. But so yeah, Jackson Stone, as always, right? A really tremendous reporter, and was doing great at this game.
So speaking of Jackson Stone, I did get a chance to go back the next morning and read his article about the game. Great article, really well done. I encourage anyone to go out and
Mhm.
check that out. Follow along on QC Times. Subscribe to their coverage. His first line, 1 yard from history.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
that says everything. It's heartbreaking, even in that context,
Right.
because just the result of the game, knowing what it would have meant to the Moline program. They'd never been to the quarterfinals. It's all so heartbreaking. But again, Mitch, like you referenced, I think in the same situation, Coach Morrissey's going to go for it again. He said that as,
Mhm.
in the quote in the article, that it's a tough decision that's going to sting. But if you're in that same, in that same setting, he's probably going to go for it again. And
Yep.
it's debatable, right? I mean, we kind of had, back and forth with people on Twitter about what do you do? And there is maybe no right or wrong answer. And depending on the situation and home or away and what overtime and, the condition of your team at the time, there's so many factors, right? Is what I'm saying.
Mhm.
But I think at the end of the day, the thought I kept coming back to is you can't be afraid to lose, right? When you're
Right.
on the 1 yard line with a third and a fourth down attempt, and you know the kind of offense you have, you can't be
In the
afraid to
fourth
lose.
overtime.
Yeah.
Right.
In the fourth overtime, you can't be afraid to lose. And I think that's where my head goes when it's like, yep, you go for it. You're at the
Yeah.
1. You may not get this shot again in a fifth, or who knows how many overtimes. So you go
Well,
for it.
right. And again, they gave it to Riley Fuller, their best player, right? And maybe it's not 9 out of 10, but in any situation, an offense on a 1 yard line is gonna probably, again, the analysts would probably say
Yep.
the offense is going to score the majority of the time. Probably not 9 out of 10, but the majority.
Sure.
And when that debate kind of comes up, the other side of the coin never does, right? Okay, What if they kicked a field goal? What if it's a bad snap? What if it's a bad kick? That,
Sure.
bad things can happen if you try and kick it too. So, again, they didn't try any trickery, right? If they tried to get this from the one and they tried some weird, play that wasn't going to work, then yeah, you could second guess it. But no, on a simple play with your best player, you roll the dice. And again, it's a credit to Yorkville for stopping it. And again, a great judgment call, I thought, from Coach Morrissey to end the game right then and there. Because, like you said, you never know; you might not get that chance again.
Yeah. And the longer you go, I mean, your team wears down, right? I mean, both
Mhm.
sides are going to get tired, but I think you're at the one, you have that shot. I think, yep, you go for it. And now,
It, it it was a weird dynamic where, again, because it was 14-14 at the end of regulation, right? Um, where that second half, especially, was just there wasn't a whole lot of I'm using air quotes action. There wasn't a lot of scoring in the second half.
okay,
And then you get to the overtime, and it was again like first play, second play. Teams were scoring back and forth. It was really quick, so it
yeah,
was just a weird dynamic there in overtime.
yeah, like I said, I think we both agree that it's the situation to go for it.
Hmm.
That being said, the result did not work the way that Moline wanted it to. But I think, man, you walk off the field and it stings, but hang your heads high. What this program has continued to build year after year, these guys, this group is a big part of that. And they didn't get to where they wanted to go, but man, they did a lot. They accomplished a
Yeah,
lot. They're Western Big Six champions. They had a great season, like we talked about. And I think someday in the future, you can be very proud of all of this and be, at least content or be comfortable with the result, whether you
yeah,
like it or not.
yeah. The good memories are always going to outweigh the bad, and again, that's coming from me, not being in their shoes right now,
Yeah.
and not being in or having that sort of same experience. But again, as time moves on for the Moline players and the coaching staff, you'll remember the good times. You'll remember the good wins. You'll remember the Western Big Six championships that you won. You'll remember all the exciting games that you won, regular season or playoff wins, whatever it may be. And this will be maybe not so distant memory, but it certainly won't weigh on you. So again, it was a tough scene. It really was, but a great season, great program. Looking forward to covering them next year, and their kids as well.
Yeah. I mean, you said it, tough scene. I found myself rewatching that final play, you know, 15 times, just sitting in my
Yeah,
living room on my couch after I got home. Like I said, following the live tweeting, then getting home and kind of following the last play. And I'm not, in any way associated with the program. And it's like I can't imagine how gut wrenching it was for,
right,
everyone involved. And I was just sitting there kind of like stunned.
right. And like I said, I was saying to myself, like, come on, everyone's like, let's just punch this in and let's move on.
Yeah.
And then what made it tough too, and I tweeted this out, the broadcast camera stayed on, right, and it kind of kept moving back and forth. I don't know if someone was doing it, or if they had it on a uh,
A lot of those are
controller.
auto, a lot of those are
Yeah,
auto type
could have
thing.
been. Yeah,
Yeah.
it could have been. But it was at least 25 minutes before Moline even started to leave the field. And Yorkville was pretty much off the field by then. And again, it was everybody who had made the trip was away from the stands and on the field for Moline. So just it's um, again, it was heartbreaking to see, but heartwarming in a sense that they had that sense of community, right? Um, what's that quote in Ted Lasso, right? The only thing worse than being sad is being sad and alone. And they weren't. That the community was there for them. They're going to continue to be there for them. And again, just we can't say it enough how much fun it was for us to cover them this year, and a great program that they have there in Molina, and should hang their heads pretty high.
Yep, for sure. So no one in this podcast is gonna want to hear it, but for just reporting purposes, Yorkville moves on to play Batavia in the quarterfinals. So
Let
that
me
will be. Yep, go
let,
ahead.
let me say this for anyone who, and again, this is just putting a light touch outside of the game of what happened. The Yorkville PA guy was the most hype man I've ever heard in my life. He would
Like,
make like a 2-yard gain sound like the Super Bowl game-winning catch.
but
Like,
okay, but in a bad way, like he was a homer.
no, because he did it for Moline too.
Okay, okay.
Now, granted, they have their Yorkville specific whatevers, but no, he did a great job of kind of being that same way with Moline.
All
So,
right.
but again, it was like every little thing was like a David Tyree Super Bowl catch. It was crazy.
All right. Well, Mitch, let's move into Class 6A. We
Yeah.
had Quincy, the Blue Devils. They were also on the verge of history, having never been to the state quarterfinals. Unfortunately, for our local area, they also fall short to Lamont, 38-24. Quincy falls. I read a little bit about this game from Don O'Brien in his article at muddyriversports.com. Obviously, we've talked about a lot about them throughout the season. I encourage anyone to go out and check out their work over there, muddyriversports.com. So, Mitch, the game was close in the first half. Halftime, it was 17-10. Lamont chose to have the wind for the third quarter. Obviously, the elements were a factor across the state, whether it was rain or wind or some combination of both. Teams were, affected it in various ways. This one really seemed like a critical decision for Lamont
Yeah.
at the time. We talked about how much there was coming in with quarterback play, right? Between both teams. And Lamont in the third quarter goes on to score the next 21 points on their way to the 38-24 win. So, that kind of tells you what you need to know is that they got the wind and they were able to capitalize on it. On the flip side, I did read a little bit about, Braden Little and the Quincy Blue Devils struggled to get their passing game going in the wind. So you hate to see that, right? You hate to see weather be a factor, but it is. It's a reality this time of year that you kind of have to play in the conditions that you're dealt, and both teams got to deal with it. And Lamont ended up, being a little more battle tested and come away with the win.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. It looked like, Braden Little had maybe some uncharacteristic interceptions that were probably affected by the weather, right? I mean, but also Lamont had a really good defense. Not going to take any away from them. They are a very, very good team. On the flip side, Jarius Rice had a nice night, a nice afternoon. So they were able to get their run game going, kept this game close. Again, a 2-score loss to Lamont is not going to sound to much to anything to the players of that program, but that's not insignificant either, because Lamont is really a really good program. I think they could make a shot here in 6A. So again, yeah, you wish this was a dry night, right? Perfect conditions, and you could have seen 2 really, really good quarterbacks just slinging the ball around. And the weather had different ideas. So, but just like with Moline, right? This was a fun season, unexpected for me to see Quincy do as well as they did. Having playmakers that are sophomores in Braden Little and Andreas Rice. So I couldn't be more excited about Quincy's future. I think they're gonna make a play for the top of the Western Big Six next year. I really do. So this could be a foundation, right? It's a loss, but it could be a foundation of where they want to go.
Absolutely. I think they have a ton to build on. Obviously, we've talked about the young talent that they have returning. Yeah, I'm really excited for them. They're going to be in the mix. I firmly believe that. Moline is going to be in the mix. You got to believe with the program that they've built up. And the other team we're going to talk about, Sterling, in a minute. I think it's going to be those 3 again, right? Potentially. Yeah. So there's a lot of excitement there, and Quincy certainly brings a lot back to be excited about. Lamont moves on to play Chicago Kenwood, the 13 seed, who sits at 8-3. So Lamont will now get the home game. If they can win that one, they're moving into the state semifinal, and then they'd really be going up against a heavy hitter, either being Crete-Monee or East St. Louis. So yeah, that 6A bracket will get really tough if it hasn't already for them.
Yeah, well, are you catching a pattern here? We talked in 7A that the 18 seed is moving on. We talked here in 6A that the 13 seed is moving on. Do you see the magic of a 1 through 32 type of seeding here, Greg?
Yeah, yeah. But actually, I hate to spoil your bubble that the 1 through 16 seed is in 6A. So
Oh, okay. I thought it kind of was. I thought you said Kenwood was a 13 seed. I'm sorry.
They are.
Or they are.
Kenwood,
They are.
Kenwood
Okay,
is
but
the
okay.
13 seed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this back to 7-8. Batavia is a really good example of that being an 18 seed. I think they're 7-3 or 8-3.
Yep.
But like they're so much better than that.
Absolutely.
So if they were ranked or seeded differently, they would have played a top seed early on. It might even won. So we'll get into that later as that's maybe on the horizon here and when we talk about 1A.
In either case, you are correct. 1 through 32 for all classes is the way to go. So you are still correct. Well, Mitch, we stay in the Western Big Six, and we had some success in Class 5A. Sterling gets the win, 50-8 over Good STEM Academy. Mitch, we kind of thought this one would play out the way it did. Sterling just looked bigger, faster, stronger in this one, and they scored from the very first possession. They were kind of off and rolling in this one.
Yeah, I was able to watch this one too. So shout out to Golden Warrior TV for put on another fantastic presentation. Shout out Arthur's, not a sponsor but could be.
Absolutely.
From the very first play of the game, I could tell Sterling was on defense. I could tell that this was going to go exactly the way we did. As you mentioned, they were faster, they were stronger, they were more disciplined. They were every facet of this game better than STEM Good was. So I don't want to knock on Good all that much because it's not on the players. It's just the nature of teams that come from the Chicago Public League who play nothing but other teams in the Chicago Public League. Even Good played a CPL team in the first round.
Yep.
Again, I don't take away from the kids because they had talent. They had some speed. If they got to the outside, they were really athletic. They scored on a 58-yard touchdown and had a 75-yarder called back on a score. But for the most part, again, this was a walk in the park for Sterling. So, but it was their quadrant of running backs and quarterbacks, their skill players. JP Schilling, Kale Ryan, AJ Kested, Tonio Tablante. They shined. They were really, really, really good. It was JP Schilling who led the way. They did pass a little bit. The wind was a factor in that game too. He passed for 60 yards and a touchdown, but he led the team with 107 rushing yards. Kale Ryan had 53 and 2 scores. Tablante had 3 rushing touchdowns. I think they were all in the second half. He might have had one in the first half. 95 yards, and then AJ Kested had 80 yards. So again, as we've seen in every single Sterling game, those 4 guys lead the offense, and a very, very good defense just allows them to play that way. So Good. I'm going to call it a tune-up game. Again, I don't take anything away from Good or Sterling's preparation, right? Because Sterling still prepped for this game, but it went the way we thought it was, and now they get a really, really good test in Sycamore next week.
Yeah, so the Golden Warriors will continue to be road warriors. The Sterling team now travels to Sycamore Saturday, 1 p.m. in the quarterfinals. Sycamore, a team that beat Chicago Westinghouse in the first round, 54-13. They got the win over Carmel, 43-0. So a dominant win in the second round. Mitch, they're led offensively by 3-year starting quarterback Eli Meyer. He and sophomore receiver Burke Goucher make a pretty good combination on the deep ball. They also have several other playmakers more in their running attack: Tyler Curtis, Zach Crawford, Joey Pulio. So, they got guys. It's no surprise. Sycamore has been a good program year in and year out. And, Zach Crawford not only ran for 91 yards on 12 carries against Carmel, he was near the team lead in tackles and had 1 for loss and multiple ones for no gain. So he's doing the work on both sides of the ball. Just a really tough football player all the way around.
Yeah, the Spartans are really, really good program, having another great year. This will be a rematch, Greg, of the 2016 quarterfinals, where Sterling did fall to Sycamore 29-22 in another great playoff game. But
a game that I was at, and speaking of like heartbreak, that was a tough one. That was a very good Sterling football team, and Sycamore came into the playoffs, I believe, with 4 losses. They were a 5-4 team, and they just put it together at the right time. And played really well that day against a very good Sterling team.
Yeah. So again, having a bit of a tune-up game again for Sterling here against Good. I just again really like the way that they're playing. They got tested against St. Viator in the first round, but eventually, got it figured out. Everything was fine. Played really, really well here against Good. So I think Sterling's going to be firing on all cylinders. I think that you couldn't ask for a more well-oiled machine in Sterling, right? They're going to give Sycamore their best shot. So I really am looking forward to this game. Was this Saturday afternoon, 1 p.m.? Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, this could be another really, really classic playoff matchup between these two programs.
Yeah, I mean, it should be a great atmosphere in Sycamore, right? I mean, two former conference opponents
Mhm.
getting back together here in the playoffs. And obviously, we talked about that 2016 quarterfinal matchup, but this should be a great football game. It has all indications of being a classic football game with, two really talented, not just, talented programs players wise, the players on the field, but I think X's and O's wise between Coach Schlemmer and I believe it's Coach Ryan on Sycamore side of things. These guys are going to have these teams prepared, ready to
Mhm.
go right from the start. And it comes down to, who executes, who can limit the mistakes. And that sounds cliche, but
Well,
these teams. Yeah, go ahead.
it goes back to your point last week that you had got from, and I don't remember what the turnover ratio was against Good, but what was it, 22-3 that they had caused versus
Going
giving up?
into it, yep,
Yeah.
going into this game against Good, it was 22-3.
Yeah, and I honestly don't remember if they got any turnovers. At least they probably had some turnovers on downs. I don't think they gave up any that I remember. But anyway, so yeah, the defense again, the game's going to be won on that end. I think to be able to stop Eli Meyer, stop Goucher, avoid the deep ball, avoid the big play, but also keep their other guys in check. So again, I look forward to this game. I think Sterling's playing really, really well, and we'll see if they can get back into the semifinals.
Yeah. So Sycamore has put up, an impressive resume, heading into the playoffs, 336 points. They only given up 55. So
Whew.
yeah, heading into the postseason, that was their numbers.
Who was their best opponent they played?
So I was just looking through. I would say their best opponent they played in week 1, they had a 35-7 win over DeKalb.
Okay.
They also had Oak Forest, who's a pretty big school, who was 5-4 on the year. They beat them 40-6, so a pretty convincing win there. Other than that, Morris, who is 7-2 on the year, they beat them in week 9, 28-0.
Morris is really good. I think they were winning their playoff game 42-0 at half this week. I don't know what the final was, but that's a really good Morris team.
So they shut them out, right? That's an impressive win.
Yeah.
Now on the other end, they also shut out Rochelle 34-0.
Another playoff team.
Another playoff team. So I think
it'll take Sterling's best effort.
Yeah,
right. It'll take Sterling's best effort, but they're playing at their best. So again, looking forward to this game.
Yeah, this seems like a toss-up, right? I don't even know what else to break down in this one. It seems like a toss-up. It's going to be two really good offenses, two really good defenses going up against each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's what you're going to see at this level here on out, right? So,
yep.
Yeah, Saturday, 1 p.m. That one is in Sycamore, so we'll be looking forward. We'll be watching that one.
Yep, this will be a game I will be keeping my eye on for sure. All right, Mitch, let's dive into Class 3A. Princeton, the top seed, gets the 26-2 win over Genoa Kingston.
Yeah.
Odd score, but I saw it play out, and it was 26-2 final score. Mitch, you were able to watch this one for a majority. I watched a little bit of it, but you saw a little bit more than I did. Tell me a little bit about this one.
Yeah, it was a hard-hitting physical game that you love to see in the playoffs. Weather was a factor in this one too. Looked like the wind was whipping pretty good there at the Jungle. But the story really for me was the Tiger defense. They were just so good all afternoon. We knew that Genoa Kingston was a really good running team. They never got into rhythm. Never. You saw hard hitting all day. The big one was on offense. This was in the fourth quarter. Um, Tegan Davis had a keeper on the right side, and his lead blocker was Augie Christensen. And he said in the post game that they had been practicing that play, and so when it was called, he knew who to look for on the Cog defense, and his eyes just kind of lit up, and he absolutely just levels this guy. Paves the way for Davis. Not that he needs a lot of room, but it made it even easier for him. So, um, but you saw a lot of that all day. So Princeton was really good. I think they fumbled the ball 7 or 8 times in this game. They recovered some of them, but I bet they lost 4. So this game probably could have been a bigger gap than it was. There was a couple of those fumbles that came in the red zone, or at least deep into Genoa territory. But and again, the safety was on a high snap, so Genoa really didn't do much in this game. It was never really in doubt after being 0-0 in the first. So a good win for Princeton. And now we get the matchup that we've been wanting to see all year.
Yeah, so here we go. The Tigers improved to 11-0 for only the second time in school history. They get the rematch against the top-ranked IC Catholic in the state quarterfinals back at Bryant Field. So, Mitch, the Tigers get to be at home again for the 3rd week in a row. You know, you got to catch some breaks to make that work, but good for them. That's a good.
I think I saw that if they were to win, they would also host the semifinal. I think there's a way that they would host the whole way through.
Yeah, that is crazy because it's rare that happens.
Right.
So this will be a rematch of last year's quarterfinal. IC Catholic came away with a 31-7 win. The semifinal would be either against Byron or Reed Custer. So Mitch, this north side of 3A is kind of playing out the way we thought it would so far. Princeton, IC Catholic, Byron, and Reed Custer were all the teams that impressed us, and they're all 4 left. So here we go. Who's going to flinch, right? This is great football. This is what we've been waiting for.
Yeah, I think the state champion lies in one of those 4 teams you just mentioned. So this is really, really good football here on these last 2 games, or not last 2, but here in the North bracket. So, for IC Catholic, they won first round 63-0 over Chicago King. Second round was weird. They won 42-14 over Stillman Valley. They were only up 15-14 at half. And I want to say they were only up 21-14 like late in the 4th. So I don't know what happened, but
yeah,
it seemed like they scored late a couple times. But again, it's still a nice win over Stillman Valley. So this is their 7th consecutive trip to the quarterfinals. Obviously lost last year to Byron in the semifinals.
Correct.
In a crazy game. So we talked about IC Catholic in the preview show, or you guys did. We could rattle off every player they have on their roster, and it would maybe do it justice. They're just so good. In the second round game against Stillman Valley, Denzel Gibson had 4 touchdowns. They've got a kid who plays on both sides. He's listed as an athlete for recruiting purposes, Dominic Hollick. He's a sophomore, but he just got offers from Illinois and Wisconsin. So, but you'll see that across every level of IC Catholic. They're just very, very good football players, very, very good program. Not unbeatable, not at all, as we saw last year against Byron. And I think this Princeton team is better than they were last year. I think they're playing better at this type of year than they were last year. So again, depending on the weather, it could change what they want to do offensively. But even in bad conditions on Saturday, you still saw Davis throw a little bit. They just didn't need to. So this, again, when we're talking about Sterling playing the best football that they have, I think Princeton's the same way. They haven't let their foot off the gas all year. So let's do it. Let's see it. Let's see Princeton at full strength, IC Catholic at full strength, and let's see who wins.
Yeah, again, I totally agree. And again, it's what we said about Sterling and Sycamore. I think it's 2 really good offenses and 2 really good defenses, and it's all going to be on that field that day. I'm excited to see this one as well. Mitch, is this also Saturday at 1:00? Do we have a time yet on this one?
I had it somewhere. I just tweeted it out. I believe it is. There was a lot of games are mostly Saturday at 1.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do a quick check for you.
The problem is if I want to watch all of them, it's gonna be really hard, especially if I go to a game.
What's nice is you get some on NFHS, but the old reliable Tiger Central Live
It
on
is
YouTube.
Saturday at 1:00.
Yeah. So
Yep.
you, at least with this one, you can get on the YouTube broadcast and have NFHS somewhere else.
Yeah. So I did watch some IC Catholic highlights just through, Max Preps or Huddle.
Mhm.
What I will say is, obviously they'll spread you out. They'll throw deep, or they'll throw to the flats. They'll go to the outside and get those, wide receivers in space. What I was impressed with, obviously, is, they can make one move and they get to top speed pretty quick, right? They're going to make one move, and if they get by one missed tackle, they're going to go a long way.
Yeah.
But this Princeton defense, Mitch, we've
I'm not. Yeah. Again, it's if IC Catholic is shifty, sure, but
Yep.
Princeton is not going to miss a tackle. They are going to, or they're not going to break a tackle on you, I should say.
Yeah.
The way that they played against Genoa, like, just smacked them in the mouth. So that's the type of defense you need to have when you're going to play a team like IC Catholic. So again, the way that they played this week, the way that they've played all season, I think is really going to play well into their hands on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you really feel like this is a disciplined Princeton defense, right? Like, they know their assignment, they know their job, and they're not going to get, I don't think they're going to get too overwhelmed and too antsy to try to make a play that's not theirs, right? And be out of position. So I'm excited for this one. And I like you mentioned it earlier. This is a better Princeton team than a year ago.
Yeah.
This is a more experienced team. Obviously, they've come a long way since then. I'm excited to see what they can do here. And I think they have a great shot. I think this is another toss-up game with two really good football teams.
I did see somewhere in an article, I think it was just the Shaw write-up from the IC Catholic game, that one of their players had said that they know that they're always the underdog. Like,
I saw that.
Who is saying that? Who has ever said IC Catholic is an underdog because they're a smaller school? No one has ever once said that. Now, we've talked plenty about IC Catholic where we think they should play in terms of classification. Never once have we said they're an underdog. I don't know where that mentality comes from.
It's funny. I read that same thing and I almost put it in the notes and I forgot before we got going here. But you're right. That underdog mentality has certainly not been mentioned on this podcast in reference to IC Catholic.
Maybe it's a coaching point that they try and keep the kids grounded. I don't know, but no one is saying that. No one has ever once said that.
No, this is going to be a great game between two great teams. And Mitch, I'll just say it because we're viewed from the West. I hope Princeton can get this one done, right?
Yeah.
I said it before the season. I said it before the postseason started. I want to see the stripes in Champaign. I want to be there when Princeton's playing in Champaign. That would be awesome. So
like I told you, it's a pretty close trip for me to get to there, opposed to DeKalb. So we know we'll have one team there, right? And one A. So if we can make a day out of it, let's do it.
I'm hoping for the best for several different teams, but
they're not going to go out and win on our behalf. But I mean, if they're listening, it's a little incentive,
That's right.
But
they're listening.
But again, let's say that happens, right? That they beat IC Catholic here on Saturday. Doesn't make the road any easier.
Oh no. Well, it doesn't get any easier because we're going to talk about the next team that would potentially be waiting for them. Reed Custer gets the win, 24-6 over Dupec. Credit to the Rivermen defense on this one, Mitch. I was really impressed. I did get a chance to watch a good portion of this game. Reed Custer was really held in check. The Rivermen did a great job of really slowing down a Comets offense that's been high octane all year, right? We've talked about how many points they've put up, and Dupec was really able to slow them down.
Yeah, a Comet team that had scored 611 points coming into the game. But talking about defense, it was that Reed Custer defense who kind of shined and maybe gave them a little bit of an advantage here. Held a really good Dupec offense to just 111 yards, only 45 on the ground. Really kept Mulcahy and then the rest of that offense in check too. So again, another great defensive battle here. We knew how good Reed Custer was going to be. We knew that this would be a hard game for Dupec. And again, you hang your heads high for the Rivermen. A great showing here in this game. Cooper Hoffman did the touchdown that they scored was a Cooper Hoffman touchdown pass to Will Howard, and it was only 8-6 at the break. So
That's
this
what I
was
mean. I mean,
close.
they really played well in the first half. Yes.
Yeah. And so they were right there. So credit to Reed Custer who made some adjustments. I didn't see how they scored, but again, this is a lot of credit to Dupec needs to be paid because they played really, really well against a really, really good opponent, and they have nothing to be ashamed of in this one. Another great season. Again, another fun team to cover. We like covering the Rivermen. So, but for now, they bid adieu. We will see them next year, and Reed Custer moves on for their rematch against Byron, which was a really good game last year.
Yeah. So Byron and Reed Custer will meet up in the quarterfinal. That's the game that would be awaiting IC Catholic and Princeton.
Mm-hmm.
So just that 3A North loaded bracket.
Who's in the South?
So yeah, in the South of Class 3A, you still have Prairie Central, 11-0.
Oh, yeah.
We've talked
Right.
a lot about. They're playing Tolono Unity in one of the quarterfinals. And actually, one of the upset teams here, Stanford Olympia, came in as a 15 seed.
Right.
At 5-4. They beat Benton in round 1 on the road, obviously, because they were the 15 seed. Then they got a home game against St. Joe Ogden and beat them 60-28. So they are really firing on all cylinders right now. They'll be tested this week, though. They go up against the 3 seed Williamsville, one of the favorites on that southern end of the bracket.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I would think. Go ahead.
We talked about on the playoff preview show how stacked this was, right? How incredibly good this 3A bracket was, and maybe with the exception of Olympia, who we didn't talk much about, but obviously they're proving to be very good. These are 8 of the best teams in the state, not just 3A. 8 of the best teams in the state that are left, and so these are really, really fun matchups that are gonna go down here next weekend.
Yeah, I think I'll be going back and watching a lot of NFHS, in delay, Saturday night after it's all said and done, because there's a lot of great football that you can't watch all at once.
I imagine all 4 of those games will be close. So
yep. Well, let's move into Class 2A. And Mitch, how about the Rockridge Rockets? They get the 27-18 win over Bloomington Central Catholic. This was a really entertaining game. And of course it was, because Jackson Stone was also at this game. So
he knows where to go. He gets the right assignments.
He covers all the good ones. So Rockridge jumped out fast. Alex Zarlatanis almost takes the first play from scrimmage to the house. He gets down to the 1-yard line, then punches it in on the next play. But this one was far from over, and back and forth all afternoon. Bloomington Central Catholic led this one 18-14 after the third quarter, into the third quarter, before Peyton Locke, 52-yard touchdown. That put the Rockets up for good. They got another from 60 for insurance. So, Mitch, credit to the Rockets defense in this one in the second half. It's a shutout effort to move on to the quarterfinals.
Yeah, so Peyton Locke had both of those second half touchdowns. He ends with 230 on the ground, 3 touchdowns. So, and again, that 60-yarder, they were winning at the time, but that added that extra insurance. But again, it's that defense who made the adjustments, right? Losing halftime, saw what they needed to see, made the right adjustments, and shut out the Saints in the second half. A Saints team that we thought were pretty good. Obviously, they beat Mercer County last week. And Rockridge just continues to play the way we thought that they would, right? They since we talked about them in their week 1 loss. I don't remember when we started predicting that they were going to go 8-1, but it was pretty early. And they just continue to play really, really well. Love this offense. Have loved it for every year that we've done the show, right? So it's just a testament to their program. Good to see them advance this far. Big test, though. Big test coming up on Saturday with one of the premier teams in 2A.
That's absolutely right. In the quarterfinals, Maroa Forsyth is waiting. They'll have to travel to Rockridge Saturday at 2 o'clock. So top seeded Maroa Forsyth, they won in the first round 69-8 over North Lawndale. Second round, they won 42-12. So a nice convincing win over Farmington, a team we've talked a little bit about this year. Mitch, as you'd expect, this Maroa Forsyth team year in and year out, they're always in the picture. And this looks to be one of their better teams in several years.
Yeah, if you look at their Twitter profile picture, it's just a series of state trophies, whether it's I think they only have one championship. I
believe two state titles. Yep.
But they're always there. They're usually out of the South bracket. So
yep.
They're in the North this year, so they get the top seed, but they're normally the South representative. So again, that win over, I would normally say that in the South, they don't really get a whole lot of competition or as good of competition in the North, but that 30-point win over Farmington is all you need to know to negate that argument. A really, really good team, as always. Aiden Reiser, their defensive leader, he had 19 tackles, including 4 for loss in the second round win over Farmington.
Yep.
He's the all-time leader for tackles for loss. So anytime you're talking all-time record for any stat at Maroa Forsyth, you're really talking about a good player.
Yep.
And to add to that, he's also a running back who had 3 touchdowns and 102 all-purpose yards in that win. So Mr. Do It Everything, really going to have to be a guy that Rockridge keys on. I would say the quarterback here, Greg, but I'm going to leave that to you because I will butcher that name.
I believe it's Caden Maurer.
Okay.
And so
I may have it's not spelled that way.
I may have misspelled it, but I believe it's Caden Maurer, quarterback, dual threat. He had 3 rushing touchdowns. He had over 200 yards rushing and passing combined. So he's, somebody you have to watch for as well. Mitch, getting back to Aiden Reiser, I love it. Kyle Kampmeyer calls him Tim Riggins of IHSA football. So you got to appreciate that reference. If you're compared to Tim Riggins, you're doing something right on a football field.
Yeah, I've seen his highlights. I've seen Maurer's highlights. So again, they're a really good team. There's nothing more you have to say about Maroa Forsyth. So the good thing for Rock Ridge is that and we sound like a broken record at this point, and we'll say it again when we talk about Knoxville. We'll say it again when we talk about the 1A teams.
Yeah,
but it's what happens this time of year. Your teams are playing the best that they have all year. And I think Rockridge absolutely falls into that same sort of category. So when you have Peyton Locke, when you have Alex Zarlatanis, and Cooper Deem, that whole offensive unit for the Rockets playing the way they are, and that defense coming up strong in the second half, what more could you ask for going into a game against Maroa Forsyth?
Well, I was going to say what I love about this Rockridge team, and you kind of pointed it out right there, is they have multiple weapons, right? It's kind of spread across their offense, not to mention a good offensive defensive line and a really solid defense who's playing really well right now. But I guess my most significant point here is that with Jacob Bain going down to injury, which is unfortunate, you never want to see that. It's created a unique dynamic to where a lot of teams don't have a whole lot of film, a whole lot of tape to study because they've kind of been shifting things around a little bit. I feel like Peyton Locke's been running out of the Wildcat, and Connor Deem's also been taking snaps at quarterback. So I just think there's a lot of different things that Sam Graves is doing on offense. And obviously Connor Deem has been, a great addition at QB, that maybe unexpected addition at QB. So I just think that's an interesting dynamic heading into this game against Maroa Forsyth, is that there's only so much they can game plan, but it's kind of adjusting as it goes week by week, it seems like.
Yeah, I think so too. So again, we look forward to this one at Rock Ridge there in Taylor Ridge, 2 p.m. on Saturday. Let me say this, Greg. Shout out to Rock Ridge Athletics Twitter for posting the message that needs to be shouted from the mountaintops.
Yes.
To not trust any sort of link on Twitter that shows a stream or whatever. 99% of those are fake. I don't think Devin X14567 has the right stream. I don't think he does. They're getting crafty now with IHSA State, IHSA football, whatever. I think the reminder there is that the IHSA Twitter account does not post streaming links at all until the state championship. So if you see if you see some sort of Twitter IHSA account posting a stream, it's probably not correct, and you're probably they're probably trying to scam you. So always stay vigilant out here, folks. Check with the school if they have something first. The bar there is to see if it's an NFHS link. If you got that, you're pretty golden.
Yep.
Other teams do YouTube, whatever it is. Don't trust these weird Twitter accounts that are just bots that are just trying to get your credit card, because you're not going to get a game stream at all. I saw a couple teams do it this week. So please, and thanks again to Rockridge for pointing this out. Please stay vigilant. Please check your links and don't fall for a scam.
They posted multiple ones that were scams. So yeah, good for them to get the message out there.
Yeah.
Mitch, before we wrap up our discussion with Rockridge, did you see the highlight or the video from Camille Gear from WQAD? She was also there covering the game at the end. Really cool moment. They go into victory formation. Jacob Bain, the quarterback that we mentioned, who's injured out for the year, was able to come in, take the victory formation, kneel down, and then the team celebrates by sprinting off the field, diving through the muddy sidelines in their white road unis. It was a cool moment.
Yeah, not for the moms and dads of the Rockridge players, because that's probably not a fun evening for them.
Well, I have it on good authority that they're getting new road uniforms next year. So
okay,
there is a little, there's not too much downside here. They can get a little dirty.
Now that I'm looking forward to. If Rockridge could improve anywhere, it's in the uniform game. So if they haven't, if you haven't designed those yet, Rockridge, we're right here. We're happy to take a look.
Yep. Yep. The the uniform consulting firm is waiting. We're right here.
Yeah. Waiting for our first assignment as we just kind of do our own thing. But yeah. Also tough afternoon for Camille, right? She had to cover this game in the elements, and then she had to watch Tennessee lose. So tough day for her.
That's true.
Tough day.
That's very true. All right. So Rockridge gets the win. Like we said, they advance to the quarterfinals. Another team from our area, Knoxville from the LTC. They are also in the quarterfinals. They defeat Bismarck Henning 48-29. Mitch, the 5th quarterfinal appearance in school history for Knoxville, that being 88, 90, 04, and 2019. So this Knoxville program year in and year out is a playoff contender. And this year is, one of the high watermarks back in the state quarterfinals.
Yeah, played really well in this game. It never really went back and forth. I wouldn't say. I think Knoxville was always in pretty good control of this one, but they did score 20 unanswered in the 4th. So a fun game to follow along on. Jackson Johnson, who we've talked about all year, was really the workhorse in this one. He had 5 touchdowns. That again pushed this Knoxville team once again into the quarterfinals. It was only 14-13 at halftime. So again, I still don't. I would still be confident in saying that Knoxville was never in doubt in this one. But they really pushed ahead there in the second half. So as you mentioned, they move on to the quarterfinals where they will play Tri-Valley. That's Saturday at 1 p.m. in Downs at the high school there. I'm just thinking about this now. Not saying that Knoxville is going to lose, because I don't think that at all. But if Rockridge were to win and Tri-Valley were to win, that would be a rematch of a first-round game from last year. That was a classic matchup.
Yes, you are correct. Also, getting back to Jackson Johnson, he ties an IHSA 2A playoff record for most rushing touchdowns in one game with his 5.
How about that?
So
all right.
Big shout out to him. And Mitch, it's good to see, he's been kind of their workhorse all year. Mm-hmm. But a week ago, it was Oscar Young getting a lot of the carries and doing great work. So it's good to have multiple weapons, right?
Well, that seems to be a pretty common factor here, denominator. I'm not a math guy. Of all the teams we've talked about, right? Rockridge, multiple weapons. Princeton, multiple weapons. Sterling, multiple weapons. So these are the types of teams that you see moving on, and it's coming to fruition here for these guys. So Knoxville again can have that sort of performance from multiple different players. So it was Jackson Johnson this week, could be somebody else next week against a Tri-Valley team who is coming off of a 28-21 win over the defending 2A champs in Wilmington. That was a really good game. So they're riding high. Knoxville's riding high. And again, another matchup that we're just looking forward to seeing, because it seems like it's a bit of a toss-up.
Yeah, I'm impressed with Tri-Valley getting what has to be considered an upset win, 28-21 over a very good Wilmington program. Just kind of looking down the schedule for Downs Tri-Valley, they have a close loss to Ridgeview Lexington, one of the powerhouse teams in Class 1A. They only lost that one 21-16.
Again, the way that Knoxville is playing, I'm just been so impressed with both sides of the ball. And again, it's the multiple weapons that they have that can stretch out a defense. And again, it could be Oscar Young, it could be any other player who gets the 5 touchdowns this week in a game. So looking forward to seeing this game on Saturday at 1 in Downs.
Yeah. Yep. Another game. Obviously, no secret here. Every quarterfinal matchup is intriguing. There's going to be some great football.
The winner of this one plays the winner of Rock Ridge and Maroa, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Who do we have in 2A South?
In 2A South, Decatur St. Teresa, obviously one of the favorites in Class 2A.
Good win over Athens in second round.
Yes. Yep. They got a win over Athens. They will host Pana.
That's a good one.
A 10-1 team right now. On the other side, going way down in Southern Illinois, Johnston City is sitting at 11-0. They will take on Althoff Catholic, who's the 14 seed at 7-4. So a couple wins, 5-4 team now grabs a couple wins in Belleville Althoff. That one will be in Johnston City. So I think looking down on that half, Decatur St. Teresa would be the favorite, of those 4. So
yeah, I know Johnson City is unbeaten. I don't know who they've played, but again, it's not easy to get the quarterfinals regardless. So but that's an interesting matchup with Pana because they're a good program.
Yeah, so Pana's good, pretty good year in and year out. Johnston City plays in the Black Diamond Conference, so maybe not the toughest conference in the state. I mean, they're not being challenged week in and week out, I don't think, compared to some of the other schools in 2A. But that's a tough matchup against the Belleville Althoff team that they've probably played some bigger schools, so that will be an interesting matchup there. But I think, Decatur St. Teresa kind of has the track record and they're hungry, right? Nashville knocked them off last year when they were a potential favorite to make it.
Crazy game.
Yes, when they were a potential favorite to make it to DeKalb to play for a state title, they never got that shot. So I'm sure they're anxious to get back. But yes, back on the northern half, Maroa Forsyth and Rock Ridge will be at Rock Ridge on Saturday. On the other half of that top bracket, Knoxville and Downs Tri-Valley. So we'll see where we end up, how all this shakes out. So let's move into Class 1A, and things have certainly shaken out in the favor of the Northwest Upstate Illini. We'll start with Fulton. They get the win 28-0 over Rockford Lutheran. That in itself, I think, is impressive.
Yeah.
That Fulton gets the shutout here over a Rockford Lutheran team that we thought could be dangerous. They proved it in round 1, right?
Right. Obviously, a Rockford Lutheran team that plays in 1A, but plays a 3A, 4A schedule coming from the Big Northern. And we're impressive in the playoffs up to this point. This one did surprise me, not taking away from what Fulton did, just with what I had been impressed with Rockford Lutheran. Also, not to take anything away from Fulton's win, it did look like the weather really, really affected what Rockford Lutheran could do.
Yep.
Game played right into Fulton's hands, right? The defense stepped up amidst 35-mile-an-hour winds, but that really took Lutheran's quarterback, King Hughes, who had a great season. He was only 2 of 14 passing for 11 yards, and one of those incompletions was a pick six. So a hard-fought game in the first half. Fulton was only up 6-0. But then they started to just chip away, right? They got the momentum. Lucas Schroeder, who was, I think, their lead back last week, did it again, 135 yards and a touchdown. They also scored on back-to-back drives. So that got them out to a 20-0 lead, and then that aforementioned pick six put this one away. So great win for Fulton. They've had a great season. Again, not trying to use the weather as any sort of excuse for why they won, because I don't think that was the case at all. I just think it took the wind took the wind out of Rockford Lutheran's sails.
Very poetic, Mitch. Very poetic.
I'm not a sea guy. So a completely not unexpected that Fulton is going to the quarterfinals. Right? They've shown all year that they were a good team. Gave Lee Win the um, best game of the year, I would say. Certainly early, it got away from a little bit in the second half,
Yep.
but here we go again. Not only a rematch from that regular season game, a rematch from the quarterfinals last year, and all NUIC quarterfinal. What more can you ask for?
Well, yeah, let's get into that. Lena Winslow gets the 76-7 win over Rova Williamsfield.
Whew.
Great season for Rova Williamsfield. I will not take anything away from them. They played a great year and really a bounce back year and really making a name for themselves in that program. They ran into a buzzsaw. This is a
Look. I really liked Rova Williamsfield this year. I've been impressed with what they did in their first kind of year as a co-op. I really tried to hide my fears in last week's episode against this because Lee Win is just an incredible, incredible team. I just kept seeing the score updates in this one as I was watching the Princeton game, and the Princeton broadcast team would be continually giving score updates, and every time it was like, "Well, I got an update from Lee Win for you," and it was just amazing to see what they were doing. So, Greg, it looks like we have some records that were set here on Saturday.
Yeah, so the Panthers set an IHSA record for most points scored in a Class 1A playoff game, that being the 76, after already having the record for most points scored in a 1A championship game at 58.
Mm-hmm.
So after not having much of a workload last week, the Panthers went back to kind of their three backs. Gunnar Lobdell, 180 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns, including the first play from scrimmage. So they left no doubt in this one. As soon as they hit the field, they were going to play a great game. Jake Zeal, another great game, 97 yards, just 7 carries, but 2 touchdowns out of that. And Gage Dunker, over 1,000 yards for the season. He went over 1,000 yards for the season in this game. So just overall, this Lena Winslow team is doing what they do so well, right? Spreading it out, getting running backs in their offensive line should get a ton of credit here. 429 rushing yards, 9 touchdowns on the day.
Mm-hmm.
Overall team effort, the line, the backs, everybody.
Yeah, I saw some highlights from this one. So obviously the offense was the story, but saw some defensive highlights, and they were in Riley Danner's kitchen on the couple of times the couple plays that I did see. They're just so fast, so strong on defense as well, as you can see here with a nearly 70-point win. So as we talked about, Fulton sets up a rematch, right, where Fulton gave Lee Win their toughest test of the season. It was close in the first half, but Lee Win pulled away. I looked up some numbers on this, Greg. Fulton is 0-2 all time. Actually, I didn't look this up. Kyle looked it up, and I found it from Kyle's Twitter. Just full disclosure. Fulton is 0-2. Fulton is 0-2 all time versus Lee Win in the playoffs. They have also lost each of their last 3 quarterfinal games. Obviously, doesn't have anything to do with this team at all. Just a trend. They lost in 01, in 16, and 21, as mentioned, to Lee Win. On the flip side, Lee Win has scored 52 plus in each of their last 4 quarterfinal games. So they've scored 50 plus on Fulton in both of the games that they've played them previously. And so this is a test. This is going to have to be another stout defensive effort from Fulton. They're going to have to do it for 4 quarters. They did it against Rockford Lutheran, but they're going to have to try and find something, anything that can stop this Lee Win offense when nobody has this year, or no one has in the last 3 years, other than Forston and other than Dupek. But you know what I mean.
Yep, absolutely. In the playoffs, it's
there. You go.
People haven't been able to stop them. I think you look at Fulton. Certainly, defensively, that's the big question, right? Is what can you draw up? What can you do to try to find some answers? On the offensive side of the ball, we've talked week in and week out. I've been impressed with Fulton's ability to really, have a balanced attack that they can throw, they can run. If they continue to do that, I think that keeps a defense, off balance a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's a really good Lee Win team. They're solid all
Yeah.
the way around. But, coming into this one, Fulton's had to battle, right? And Lee Win didn't really have to battle much so far. I don't know if
No,
that plays into it, but
this was. I mean, I don't remember what the score was at half, but this was probably one of the first games in a while where all of their guys have played probably into the second half pretty strong, and you see what happens. So, um, what you were talking about Fulton being balanced, where Lee Win is not. You
yeah,
know what they're going to do. You know
yeah.
exactly what they're going to do. You don't have to pretend to defend a pass at all, and they still can't be
And
stopped.
they still, yeah, yep.
So, but regardless, looking forward to this. Playoff football at Fulton is a lot of fun. It's a great environment. I told my parents to go, um, and I think this will be just another classic NUIC matchup. And again, it's just a testament to the conference that we have 4 teams here in the North, one of which will be in Champaign, and looking forward to seeing who comes out standing.
So I already got the text from Matt Randazzo asking if I'd be interested in going to Fulton to cover this one. So
Mhm.
actually,
That's
he said it in a group text and said, "What are the odds that Greg's going to be there covering this one for us?" So I think he already assumes
so
this is the
so
one I'm going to pick.
So he texts you when he needs something, but he won't text when you need something from him. Okay, that makes sense. I get it. Yeah, I got it.
I'll let you guys fight that one out.
Well, I'm not going to text if I need something. That's for sure.
So I was there last year in Lee Win for this quarterfinal game. So
Yeah,
maybe I have to make the trip again. This one much closer to my house in Fulton. So maybe make this trip and yeah,
it's gonna be a great. Fulton has always had great community presence. It's gonna be hard to park. I'll tell you that much.
yeah, yeah.
It's really a tough place to park, um, but it's gonna be packed. Hopefully the weather's nice. And again, Fulton is such a cool place to see a game, regardless. Even that much cooler in a playoff setting. So we'll see if they can get that steamer golf cart thing rolling. And for their hope, they're going to need to beat Lee Win.
Yep. I'm hoping for a great game, right? A great
Yeah,
battle of NUIC football teams in the postseason. And Mitch, this is an NUIC matchup up on the top of the North bracket, and it's not the only one.
yeah.
Dakota and Forreston, both 4 and 5 and 4 teams coming into the playoffs, but teams that we thought, they may have been battle tested and ready to go in this 1A bracket, and they have certainly proven it. Let's start with Forreston.
Yeah.
Forreston gets the win 44-16 over Chicago Hope Academy. Mitch, this was a game we talked a lot about last week because we were really interested in the contrast in styles,
Hmm.
and we kind of saw that play out, and that NUIC style of really hard hitting football. Forrest improved it once again. They've done it before. They did it again
Yeah.
on Saturday.
Well, and I'm not going to take away from the independent teams because that's not the same as what Chicago Public League teams do, right? But again, our concern with Hope was that they hadn't played anybody outside of Marquette. And we knew that they hadn't played anybody who plays like Forreston does. And it and like we talked about in the Sterling game, this played out exactly the way that we thought it was going to go.
Yeah. So reading the article from the Sauk Valley Times, Andy Colbert caught a great quote on the sidelines from Chicago Hope midway through the second quarter. You hear a coach yelling, "We're getting run over and pushed around."
Yeah.
And I think that quote
Yeah.
kind of
Yes.
says what NUIC football wants to do to you, right?
Hmm.
They want to power up front and they want to really be able to push you around and hit you hard. That's what Forreston does. That's what a lot of these NUIC teams do. Mitch, your guy, Johnny Kobler, continues to get the job done for the Cardinals
Hmm.
on the ground.
Yeah, he seems to be the top back amongst many in their arsenal. But yeah, my guy Johnny, 182 yards on 26 carries, 3 scores in this one. And again, this was what was they were up, I think 4-8 at halftime. So never in doubt in this one. And this sets up a really intriguing matchup. And we'll talk about the Dakota game here now, but more intrigued by this one than Lee Win Fulton.
Yeah, this one I agree is very intriguing. I don't know which one I'm more interested in, but it's really close. It's going to be really good football. So Forreston advances to take on Dakota in the quarterfinals. Dakota gets the win in the second round, 30-19 over Ottawa Marquette. Mitch, this was the quote from Coach Yupst from Marquette, and I think it kind of sums up everything you need to know about playing an NUIC football team. Quote, "They didn't do anything we didn't expect. They just did it very well."
Yeah.
So that's, these Northwest Upstate Illini teams,
Well,
they're
and
not
that's, yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Go
they're
ahead.
not going to surprise you,
Right.
but they're going to be very effective in what they do.
Yeah. And that was the Dakota teams of the early 2000s that I played against. That was their MO, right? Much Lee Win like. You knew what they were going to do. And you couldn't stop it because they were so well at executing their offense. So, yeah, this was 200 yards combined, 3 touchdowns. They had to just like Forreston does, rotating fullback Thomas Bowman, Connor Matthews. They're the leading rusher from the NUIC this year, Adrian Arellano, who had a good game last week. Only had 47 yards. They didn't really need him. So, again, another team, again, I keep saying it, or we keep saying it, teams that have multiple weapons are the teams that advance. And Dakota and Forreston and Lee Win and every team we've talked about that won in the second round and pushed on have those same qualities. So cool to see. Again, we've talked so much about the NUIC this year and how we thought it could happen. We thought that the top 4 teams in 1A were from the NUIC. It's unfortunate that they have to face each other here in the top bracket. But it doesn't take away from what they are. If the state wasn't already on notice, which I don't think that they weren't, look no further than right here.
Yeah. I hope they take notice, and I hope that they realize that this should be, these teams should be spread out because they're proving themselves,
Yeah.
in this postseason format. I was really impressed with Dakota and the way they played and the way they executed this one against Marquette. So they grabbed all the momentum early. Dakota did. They were down 6-0, but they ended up charging out to a 22-6 lead. Marquette grabbed a lot of momentum back at the end of the first half. They cut it to 22-19. So halftime, this game felt like it was going to be really close moving into the second half, just based on Marquette really kind of storming back. Marquette gets the ball to open the second half. They march down a slow, methodical drive, a Coach Yupst kind of drive. They convert on a couple different 4th downs, but they get down to the Dakota 15 and they fall short. They can't convert a 4th down. Dakota ends up marching straight back downfield, very similar drive, and just controlling the clock, not passing the ball at all. They only threw the ball twice, and once was at the end of the first half, and it was an interception. They didn't pass again. So they score. Marquette goes 3 and out. Then Dakota runs out the final 10-19 of the game. I mean, Mitch, we talked about last week Forreston going up against Chicago Hope Academy, and I thought if Forreston would hold the ball long enough, that's what they're going to do, control the game by controlling the clock. That's exactly what Dakota did in this one. I mean, Marquette had 3 plays after they were stopped on a 4th down, had 3 more plays the rest of the game in the 4th quarter.
Right.
Dakota completely controlled it. So
yeah, hard to come back when you don't have the ball.
Yeah.
Credit to Dakota and their blonde hair there.
I did see some of that on the sideline.
And again, that was something that happened in my day. So
okay.
Must be some sort of tradition there for the Indians. So so as we've mentioned, they move on. They're going to be at Forreston Saturday at 2:00. Historically, They've met Forreston 4 times in the past, 1 and 3 in those playoff matchups. Conversely, Forreston 3-1. And Forreston has won each of their last 4 quarterfinal games. So again, it has nothing to do with this team, just kind of a trend. But where I think, and I mean no disrespect to Fulton or to Jeff up there, I think that game is a little bit easier to predict than this one is. Obviously, this game was a classic in the first round, but we didn't see this coming because Dakota at the time was 1-2, I think, and Forreston might have been 3-0. And Dakota gets a late score and beats Forreston 34-28. So that's certainly going to be on the minds of Forreston, right? They're going to want to extract some revenge on this in the same way that Lee Wynn did last year in the playoffs, coming back and beating Forreston after losing to them in the regular season. So a lot of intrigue here. I am two teams that have very similar strategies when it comes to how they play the game. They're going to want to control the clock, and they're just going to want to chip away 3-4 yards at a time. So who has the ball last type of deal here could be who can limit their mistakes. Defenses are going to be grabbing at the ball if they know that they might not be having many chances on offense. So I can't pick this one. I'm not going to. Really looking forward to it, though.
Yeah, so Dakota was 2-1 going into that matchup with Forreston. But the thing was that their first game of the season was against Chicago Christ the King.
Yeah.
And their second game of the season was against Lena Winslow.
Yeah.
So then they had a win over Stockton in there in week 3. Mm-hmm. But I think all that being said is that when you had Christ the King, who was 2-7, and you had Lena Winslow, who was obviously 9-0 and a very good football team, you didn't really know what to expect out of Dakota then going into that Forreston game.
Well, and probably that was leftovers from Dakota's team last year, right? It was just unexpected in that Forreston has been this great program the past couple of years. Obviously, Dakota historically is the same, but coming off of last year where Dakota was 2-7.
Yep.
1-8, 2-7.
2-7.
You just didn't expect it to happen this soon for Coach Sheets. So a great win. Obviously a pretty big pillar in their season that propelled them into the playoffs now, having won the first 2 games. So anything can happen in this rematch. Again, Forreston's going to have a little bit of revenge on their minds, but Dakota playing well. Maybe Forreston gets the edge playing at home, though.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that helps to be at home this late in the playoff run. I think the one interesting factor in this game is Dakota kind of had to abandon their passing game with Niedermeyer at quarterback because of the conditions, right? In the weather, like we've talked a lot about against Marquette. So if it's a better day weather-wise, can Dakota make more of an effort to, throw the ball around a little bit and really balance themselves out? And is that something that gives them a little bit of an advantage if they can, find some space? I don't know. Forreston's a great defensive football team. They've been playing really well, this year and especially in this playoff run. So something to watch for there, though. It's just to see if the weather makes, if better weather makes a different offensive look for Dakota.
Yeah, I could see this being like an 18-12 type of game, right?
Yep.
And so that takes like an hour and a half.
Yeah. Well, Mitch, so that sets the scene for Class 1A. Again, going back, Lena Winslow, the number 1 seed, taking on conference rival Fulton, the number 4 seed. The other half, Dakota, the 10 seed, Dakota's the 11 seed, going on the road to the 10 seed Forreston. So there's our 4 NUIC teams all meeting up in the state quarterfinals.
And the South has 4 really good teams too.
Yeah, I was just going to say, let's go through that. So Ridgeview Lexington, who Lena Winslow fans are familiar with, played them in the semifinals a year ago. They're still hanging around. They got the win 58-20 over Salt Fork. They now go up against Tuscola. Obviously a great program. Don't need to, hype them up any. People are very familiar with Tuscola. On the other end, a team I've been impressed with this year continues to look good. Camp Point Central gets the win over Cesar Valier. The shutout 24-0. So they move on to 11-0. They take on Greenfield Northwestern, who now sits at 10-1 on the season. They got the win over Toledo Cumberland. So yeah, like you said, that Camp Point Central team stands out to me. Ridgeview Lexington has stood out to me all year as the two undefeated teams down there. But their opponents they're playing this week are both very good football teams.
Yeah, impressive win for Tuscola beating Route. Yeah, these are really, again, 4 really good quarterfinal games. It'll be 2 really good semifinal games, and then I fully anticipate having a really, really good 1A game. Again, Lee Win has been the standard, possibly still are, right? Not impossible to overtake them. Don't want to, take down Fulton's hopes all that much by predicting that game, but it's just a tough task, right? You're going to have to prove it to me for me to believe it, sort of thing. So, but whoever comes out of this NUIC North bracket, let's call it, there will still be a good team that comes out of the South awaiting in Champaign.
And either way, Kyle Kampmeyer from NUICfootball.com has already made his reservations with no hesitation. Again, because
job security.
That's right. Well, before we get into 8-man, Mitch, I got to be a homer for 1 second and give a shout out to Marquette. They had a great season, a very talented group of seniors this year. Another great season from Coach Yups. He got his 100th win at Marquette. Just where this program has come from, go back to 2010, 2011, when there had been years before that where they had hardly won more than 2 or 3 games. So for Coach Yups to come in when he did and really revive this program, and now year in and year out, this Marquette team is somewhere in the mix, right? In this Class 1A playoffs. Sorry, I know it's a homer moment to anyone listening. To anyone listening from, Marquette, from Ottawa, take pride in the Crusaders are here every year now. And it's awesome. I love it.
Well, and they're on, the horizon of a whole new conference, a whole new, a standard here moving forward. So they're last year in independent as they move to the something Prairie Football Prairie,
like
something.
Chicago Prairie or Chicago Prairie Football League.
I think it's Football League or something. So
yeah.
A whole new season about to embark for the Crusaders. But yeah, like you said, a great season for them, getting that win over Morrison in the first round.
And a fight song, and you learn their fight song, Mitch. That's great.
Yeah, you can listen back if you want to ever hear that again. And their only loss prior to that being to Hope. So yeah, great year for them, and look forward to seeing them what they do in their new conference.
Yep. All right, well, Mitch, we getting into 8-man, and now we're into the 8-man semifinals. They're a round ahead. Things are getting real serious here in the 8-man ranks. One of the best games this week in the 8-man division. Amboy gets the 30-28 win over Milford Cisna Park. Clippers erased a 10-point fourth quarter deficit to defeat MCP. MCP took a 28-18 lead on the first play of the fourth quarter. Amboy answered immediately. Landon Welchel ran for a 51-yard touchdown on the first play after the kickoff to cut the deficit to 28-24. Next possession on third down, MCP quarterback Sawyer LaFoon tried to throw for the first down, but the pass is intercepted by Eddie Jones. He returns it back inside the 20. Clippers then had a 4th and 12. Tucker Lindenmeyer hits Brennan Blaine. That's a connection we talked about early in the season. Great to see Lindenmeyer back and making those plays. Yep. He hits Blaine on a short pass. Blaine took it to the house. That makes it 30-28. That would be the final score. Man, that's a great win for Amboy, having to come back in the end there.
Yeah, we talked about Lindenmeyer's impact. And how Amboy kind of weathered that storm. That's a Clipper reference.
I like it.
And now, they were top ranked when he was around, and now that he's back, they're back in the semifinals where they went to last season, right?
I believe so. Yep.
They went a kind of a run and got to the semifinals. I don't remember who they lost to. It might have been Polo, but Yeah, a really good win against an MCP team here for Amboy, and again coming down to the wire there a little bit, showing their toughness, showing their grit. So they will play. Yeah, they got a nice hand here in playing STM. Whereas I wouldn't want to see West Central in the semifinals. Sorry to Polo, but yeah, great win for Amboy. Another great season that they've had here in 8-man, and one more win, and they'll be sitting there in Monmouth, ready to go.
Yeah, so Amboy will now take on, like you said, St. Thomas More. St. Thomas More had the upset, what I would consider an upset
Oh
win
yeah,
over Decatur Lutheran.
absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so 44-38. Sabres were down in this one. St. Thomas More Sabres were down 22-6 early on in this one. And man, when you're talking about in that kind of deficit with a Decatur Lutheran team that has a weapon like Leighton Miller,
Mhm.
that is an impressive comeback as a team in St. Thomas More that maybe their record didn't quite indicate the tough team they are. And they
Right.
proved it in this one. This is a big win for them. So they will now take on Amboy. The other game on the other side will be West Central versus Polo. We'll start with West Central. They get the win over Milledgeville 38-14 in Biggsville on Saturday. Mitch, the name, no shock, Caden Drosty,
Mhm.
266 yards, 29 carries, 4 touchdowns. But you also had Mason Carnes going for 71 and 13 rushes and a touchdown. Parker Meldrum, 76 yards and on 13 rushes. Great blocking all day. The Heat get 388 total yards of offense. So, I mean, it's a team we've been impressed with, Mitch, and they had to get it done against a good Milledgeville team. They get their second win over Milledgeville this season.
Yeah, it seems weird to say that 38 is holding the Heat in check a little bit, but it kind
Yeah.
of is the way that their season has been. Again, looked a little rough conditions there at the game, but it's the same result that we've expected from West Central all year. Drosty, obviously, again, and again, 266 seems low, right? Just
Yeah.
kind of the type
Yeah.
of year and type of numbers that they put up, but all the credit to that great line they have, and a really stout defense. I don't recall off the top of my head what their closest game has been, because they're undefeated, right?
Yeah. West Central's
Yeah.
undefeated. Their closest game, I mean, they didn't even really play anyone close. Maybe 58-20 over Ackwen.
So a 38-point game. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah. So credit to Milledgeville. They had a great year. Obviously, they had some injuries, some off the field stuff that they were way into. So shout out to Coach Roble there on a great season in Milledgeville. And the Heat, though, they move on to face the 2-time champs.
Yeah, I guess I should give credit to Ridgewood and Milledgeville also played them quote unquote close. Ridgewood
Yeah.
scored 34 points in a loss. It was 66-34.
Yeah.
Milledgeville in their regular season game scored 36 points against them, but lost 64-36. So anyway,
Right.
some good playoff teams that put up some points, but this West Central team has been just unstoppable on offense.
Right.
Milledgeville did slow them down a little bit. Maybe the weather slowed them down a little bit as well, but either way, they move along. Polo gets the win now. So West Central will meet up against Polo. They knock off Ridgewood 38-22. Mitch, this one was kind of a battle between Brock Soltow and Gavin McDonough for
Mhm.
Ridgewood. McDonough had 3 touchdowns for the Spartans. Soltow had 301 yards, 5 touchdowns on 31 carries. So really carrying the load for this team while Grenoble's out. The Polo defense got a key stop midway through the second half. That paves their way to victory. The Marcos took a 16-8 lead into halftime after a 39-yard touchdown run by Soltow, but Ridgewood tied it up early in the third period. But overall, just a great effort from this Polo team. Mitch, the quote that kind of stood out to me, Ty Reynolds from Sauk Valley and contributes to Friday Night Drive. He interviewed head coach Ted Alston after the game for Polo. And Coach Alston said that, quote, he didn't think that he thinks this team has grown so much. that going
Mhm.
back to weeks 1, 2, and 3, we wouldn't have won a game like this, but we've gotten tougher. We've made better tackles. Offensive line has really started to play well. So I think that's an interesting quote to me because we did kind of talk about those first few weeks of the season or that first halfway point of the season, that halfway point of the season. We were kind of looking at other teams and Polo was just kind of there, right? They weren't
Yep.
they weren't doing
Yep.
anything bad, but they hadn't had a key win yet.
Right. Yeah, they've just increasingly got better and better every single week. Do we know, is Avery Grenoble still out? Was he out in this one against Ridgewood?
He was out again
Okay.
in this one. I don't know his status moving forward, but
Okay.
credit to Brock Soltow for
Yeah.
really, playing well and becoming the workhorse for him.
Yeah, and congrats too to Ridgewood. This was their first year in 8-man. We knew that they were good. They had a great season, got to the quarters, and look forward to covering them next year. So now we get this West Central against Polo match here. Greg, what would Ric Flair say about this game?
Hey, to be the man, you got to beat the man.
That's right.
So what?
Yeah,
Yeah,
if West Central wants to stake their claim, what better way to do it than here in the semifinals against the two-time champs and a team that is playing again the best that they have been all year, just increasingly better every single week. And this will be a fun game to see.
yeah, I really love that this matchup is maybe the favorite in 8-man football in West Central. The team this year that has really kind of carried the way as the team, the potential number one or the next state champion.
Yeah.
But now you got to go up against the two-time defending state champion. That is a perfect
Yeah,
matchup.
This is not to take away anything from Amboy or STM, but this would have been a really fun like state championship game. So at least we do get to see them go up against one another in the playoffs because I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, again, like a lot of these 8-man games, it becomes Brock Soltow and can West Central slow him down? And will Polo have an answer for the weapons like Drosty and like Carnes on that other side of things?
Mm-hmm.
This West Central team has impressed me all year because they just their talent runs so deep, right? They just
Mm-hmm.
Leighton Miller was so impressive for Decatur Lutheran, but you didn't know what else he really had around him. But this West Central team just has so many weapons.
Right. Yep. So this again, they're down to it here in the final four, and the winners of the two semifinals will play next. Well, depending on when you're listening to this, Friday the 18th.
I believe, I believe so.
So probably at night, 7:00 at Monmouth College. So that'll be we're down to it. We'll know who's playing with it on Saturday night going into next week. So really looking forward. Both games are toss up. So really looking forward to seeing who comes out and who we'll be talking about next Friday night.
Yeah, this may be the year that I have to make it to the 8-man state championship game. I haven't made it yet, and I think maybe this is the year that I do it. So
it'll be cold. It looked cold last year. So
you get to that time of year when it's at 7:00 at night, it's going to be cold almost regardless. So I suppose if it's not windy and raining, I'll take just cold, right?
There you go. Yeah.
I will say that of all the weeks to not be able to shoot high school football, being indoors watching Marquette and Dakota and Princeton and some of the other games, like it was okay if I had to take a week off,
Yeah. But that's what makes it special because obviously when Iowa gets to the semifinal round, they're playing indoors.
Yes.
And we've both covered state championship games there. I think I've covered 2. It's just kind of different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the Unidome is sweet. Like the Unidome is awesome and it's cool to have. Obviously it's loud. It's warm, but it just kind of takes away from the experience for me anyway.
Well, I guess what I was referencing was for me not having to be on the sidelines with a camera and trying to keep a camera dry.
Right.
It always becomes a little tricky. Now, that being said, I love the sight lines of muddy jerseys when it's, on a grass field. That becomes awesome. But I have nightmares about trying to keep cameras from getting, too wet and too weather beaten. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, and then back in in our day, sounding like old guys. You had your notebook, right? And
Oh,
so
absolutely,
you write down timestamps and numbers and what happened. So yeah, that just added to the difficulty of trying to keep all that dry.
Well, but now you're trying to keep your phone dry because you're trying to keep notes on your phone.
Yeah,
So
right.
it's a different challenge. But anyway, let's hope for better weather this Friday and Saturday. And
looks like
actually,
it. I think it looks like it looking ahead. So
yeah, I don't know if we have any Friday games. I said Friday, but I think for the most part, our games are
no,
Saturday this
I
week.
think everything Saturday. That Friday game would be the state championship for 8-man. But other than that, we should be done on Fridays.
All right. Well, Mitch, we'll be following along, and I'm sure you'll be all over Twitter. So everyone listening, follow along on our Twitter account, View from West Pod, and Mitch will be keeping us all updated. I hope I'm walking the sidelines again this week. So that Fulton Lena Winslow game may be where I head. So
yeah, that'll be a busy afternoon with all the games kind of starting at the same time.
Yeah.
So we'll have to again keep our options, our viewing options open. Luckily we have a few now, which is nice. And yeah, I can't wait to see. For next week's episode, I can't wait to see who we're talking about.
Yeah. So Mitch, it's like we say every week, who's going to be practicing Monday? Who are we going to be podcasting about next Monday? So that is the question. All right. Well, thank you, Mitch. Thank you to everyone who listens. We will talk to you next week. That'll do it for this week's episode of View from the West. Thank you so much for listening. I encourage you to go out to Apple Podcasts or Podbean and subscribe so you can follow along, and downloads will come automatically every week. You can follow along on Twitter at ViewFromWestPod. You can also email me if you're interested in being a sponsor, viewfromwestpod@gmail.com. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.